Hotepu, on the screen in front of you, you have the world's oldest calendar called the famous DENDERAH Zodiac. DENDERAH is a temple from ancient Egypt, and this wheel was carved on the ceiling in the temple. And although archaeologists say this wheel itself in this particular temple was made in the late dynastic era, the information and data used to generate it is millennia old. In fact, when the Greeks first entered Egypt, they asked the black initiates of Kemet, "How old is your country?" To which they responded, "We have seen 4 great suns, S-U-N-S. A sun is 1 precession of the equinoxes, or 25,920 years. Times that by 4, you get about 104,000 years old." So, this calendar is based upon very ancient astronomical observations. In fact, to encode all the data hiding in this wheel, you would need about 104,000 years of observation to figure this out. So, let's dive in. You see here a wheel held up by figures on the outside. Now, there are 12 figures, although they're cut off at the 3 and 9 o'clock point. They're cut off. I chose this image because the color palette on the inside of the wheel is very good for describing what you're looking at. But I had to cut off the figures at the 3 and 9 o'clock point. But you see their little hands touching the wheel. So there are 12 figures, and there are therefore 24 hands touching the wheel. These 24 hands are the hour hands. In fact, our phraseology of a clock having an hour hand, a minute hand, a second hand, came from these Africans in Egypt, where these 24 hands along the cosmic clock identify that we developed the world's first 24-hour clock. Now, to say that's easy to do would be valid if everyone did it, but not everyone did it. Only the blacks of Egypt did this, because the length of daylight hours and night hours is not uniform through the year. In the summer, daylight is longer. In the winter, the nights are longer. So it takes some very sophisticated observations to see that no matter how long or short the day is, it's 24 hours in total each day. We left proof in stone that we knew this by the 24 hours of the hands of the clock of time. Now, of course, if there are 24 hands, there must be 12 figures, because there's 2 hands per figure. These are the 12 figures of the tropical zodiac, the 12 figures of the seasonal stations of the sun. Let's be clear, many astrologers mess this up horrifically. They should be embarrassed. You can't say that you practice tropical astrology. Astro means star. Ology means study of. However, tropical zodiac is not between the earth and stars. It's between the earth and the sun, which is a star, but not constellations. So you can't be a tropical astrologer and say, oh, your sun is in the sign of Gemini, the twins. That's impossible. Because by definition, tropical cuts out constellations and only focuses on how the earth and the sun interact. Basically, tropos means turning point, where the sun turns directions in the seasons. At summer, the sun is 23.5 degrees declining or deviating north of our equator. Then it begins to turn around and come back towards the 0 point, where it's dead on the equator at the spring and fall equinoxes. We call that the Sphinx point, because the Sphinx marks that point when the sun is on the first day of spring, always on the equator. Then the winter solstice is when the sun declines or deviates minus 23.5 degrees or so south of our equator, and then turns around, tropos turns around back towards the Sphinx, right on the equator at 0 degrees deviation. So, you notice I made no mention of Taurus or Aquarius or Gemini, because tropical astrology is not constellation based. It's just bad language, bad science to say that. You can say tropical sunology, tropical sun-earthology, tropical seasonology. Those would be more valid phrases. But you can't call it astrology. And this outer wheel is called, in Egypt, they called it the farmer's calendar, because it clocked the season stations of the sun, so you knew when it was spring and summer and fall and midsummer and midwinter and so forth, to know when to do things with your crops, to plant or to harvest. It also marks the 12 gods of the seeds of the ancestors. We use it as a fertility cycle of food, and also the cycle of the fertility of the ancestors. The tropical system clocks when we scheduled our ancestral rituals in Egypt. A secret that we have revealed here in the gay shaman system of the Golden Beetle. We have uncovered the actual rituals used in Egypt by going into ritual trance with the drum and our chants. And the ancestors told us what they did at each season of the farmer's calendar to awaken the ancestors, the gatekeeper ancestors. So we see the outside wheel is what? The revelation of the blacks of Kemet, the Africans of Egypt, showing they knew the 24-hour calendar, they knew the 12 seasonal station calendar of the tropics. And if you look at the lower right corner, it says east of origin, and there's a glyph with a line going through it, a dashed line. At the lower right, at the upper left, you see west of origin, and you see another glyph. The east of origin glyph is called Optet, which means east. And the west of origin glyph is called Amentet, which means west. The line connecting these two glyphs on the outer wheel, outside of the wheel, is the plane of the Milky Way. The galactic plane, which became very famous in the West with the Olmec Mayan calendar, 2012. This is the exact same plane. And we show here we knew it. They didn't invent anything in the Olmec or Mayan culture that we didn't know in Egypt. In fact, the Olmecs came from Egypt. They were Egypto-Nubians, which those big African heads show. And the braids on these giant colossal heads of La Venta, Mexico, and the Olmec culture are Nubian-style braids. Okay, now we go inside this wheel and we see yellow figures, which are the deacons. There are 36 such yellow figures. Why? Several reasons. Egyptians had a very stable, regular calendar. We had a year. I'll discuss in future podcasts how we really saw a year. But for now, let's call a year what we call it pretty much now. In Kemet, we had a year of 12 months of 30 days each. Not like the stupid, retarded Western calendar where you have 29 days, 30 days, 31 days, 28 days. It's random and chaotic. It's a very primitive calendar, this Western calendar. We had 12 months, and each and every month had exactly 30 days, because it takes the sun 30 days to go through a sidereal star sign constellation. It takes 30 days for the sun to go through a sign. So that was a sidereal calendar, not tropical, but star-based. Each of these 12 months of 30 days had just 3 weeks, but a week was 10 days long, not 7 days long. 10 called Deca, like in deacon, meaning 10. This proves that we had a decimal counting system in Egypt, which was proven when they discovered in Zaire a bone called the Ishango bone, which they carbon dated to 90,000 BC. 90,000, which makes sense if you know that the Kamau will say, well, we were here 104,000 years ago. And this Ishango bone, which is a baboon's bone, shows tick marks clocking a decimal-based lunar calendar, the world's first lunar computer, was 90,000 BC years in Africa. And you see the traces of it here, of us preserving this decimal way of counting in tens, in decas. So, on one hand, if you look where it says east to the right around 3 o'clock, you have in yellow, you have a little man, a little boy on a flower with his hand to his mouth, telling you that that is the star that the Sphinx is staring at, marking the star of the age. So these yellow stars tell you the main stars of the age. But in the week system of the month, we had two kinds of stars that told us what time it was at sunrise and what week we were in. The two kinds of stars are called heliacal rising stars and morning rising stars, which many astrologers embarrassingly get wrong. There's a difference. Quickly, a heliacal rising star means you're out at night looking at a star, you see it 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it's gone. You don't see it for several weeks, days, or months. Then it reappears very briefly right before sunrise. So we say the star was there, it died, I didn't see it, it went into the duat or underworld, and then it resurrected at sunrise with Ra, the sun, at morning. We call this the heliacal rising or the resurrection star. It means a star that was there, disappeared, and reappeared at dawn. That's called heliacal rising. Note it well. Morning rising stars are stars that just happen to be with the sun at dawn. They were there all night long, and they happen to be there right before sunrise. They never died. These yellow figures are a combination of heliacal rising markers and morning rising markers, and we could then figure at night by what was rising at sunset, the first hour of the night. So we were able to see the hours of the day and night here. The yellow figures would be, the yellow figures, yes, are the deacons. There are 36 of them. And then the orange figures are the sidereal sun stations. You see it around 3 o'clock, 2 fish of Pisces, then a ram in orange, then a bull in orange going backwards, and you see twins holding hands. You see a beetle in orange, you see a lion and a boat in orange of Leo, then Virgo, the woman holding the staff of wheat. Then you have the scales in orange of Libra, the scorpion in orange. Then you have above the scorpion is Ophiuchus, Ra sitting in his boat. Then you have at noon Sagittarius in orange. Then you have the goatfish of Capricorn, and finally the Hoppy Aquarius water bearer in orange. The blue stars spiraling like a nautilus shell, or the Fibonacci golden ratio. The blue stars are the North Pole stars, and the pink stars are major constellations we identified. Like at around 5 o'clock you see a man striding with a staff and a bird plucking his foot. That would be Orion. You have a hawk on a black papyrus stalk. That would be the galactic equator and the supergalactic meridian. Behind that you have a cow on a boat. That's going to be Sirius. And around 3 o'clock you have in brown the fish of Pisces bound to these stars of Cetus. Beneath one fish, the orange fish, is a circle. That's Fornax, the furnace. Above second fish, you see a circle. It's hard to read, but there's an eye in there. That's going to be the stars of Triangulum. So what we have here is the revelation that the gatekeepers of Egypt, because the black gay men of Egypt were the master astrologers, as they are today in the Dogon, who are the modern Egyptians of the Temple of Amun. We see here the 24-hour day shown, the tropical zodiac shown. We see here heliacal rising stars. We see here sidereal astrology, North Pole stars. We see the galactic plane. The figures holding up the east and west, the two hawks you can't see at the left at the 3 and 9 o'clock points, would be the equator. That's the spring equinox point. And the hawks at 12 and 6 o'clock areas on the outside circle are the solstice points. We see the fixed stars. We see all of astrology in this one image. It's an amazing image. And we will go into more detail revealing its mysteries. So stay tuned for more information on this, the DENDERAH Zodiac of the Blacks of Egypt, Dwawen Hotepu.